Welcome to Module 2. At the end of this module, participants should be able to define terrorism financing and distinguish it from money laundering, define countering the financing of terrorism, identify the sources, methods, and channels of terrorism financing relevant to Nigeria, understand the Nigerian legal framework governing terrorism financing, recognize the specific vulnerabilities of legal services to terrorism financing abuse, comply with NBA-led obligations relating to sanctions, asset freezing, and reporting. Terrorism financing refers to the provision, collection, movement, or management of funds, assets, or economic resources with the intention or knowledge that they will be used, in whole or in part, to carry out terrorist acts or support terrorist organizations or individuals. Under the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, TPPA 2022, terrorism financing includes direct or indirect provision of funds for terrorist acts, making funds, property, or services available to terrorists or terrorist groups, concealing or disguising the source or destination of terrorist funds. A defining feature of terrorism financing is that the funds may originate from legitimate or illegitimate sources. Countering the financing of terrorism, CFT, refers to the measures, laws, and procedures implemented to detect, prevent, and disrupt the flow of funds that support terrorist activities. It works alongside anti-money laundering, AML, efforts by focusing specifically on identifying and blocking financial resources used to facilitate terrorism. For legal professionals, CFT obligations mean being vigilant in recognizing and reporting transactions that may be linked to terrorism financing, ensuring that their services are not exploited to aid such illicit activities. The source of funds for money laundering is always illicit. In contrast, the source of funds for terrorism financing may be licit or illicit. The objective of money laundering is the enjoyment of proceeds. For terrorism financing, the objective is the commission of terrorist acts. The end use of money laundering is personal or commercial benefit. However, the end use of terrorism financing is ideological, political, or religious violence. Detection complexity for money laundering involves financial concealment. For terrorism financing, it often involves low-value, fragmented transactions. In Nigeria, kidnapping for ransom and banditry-linked financing remain dominant terrorism financing typologies. Common mechanisms of terrorism financing include cash couriers and informal value transfer systems. There is also the abuse of legal entities and associations, as well as clients with known links to prescribed terrorist organizations. Unusual requests for anonymity or secrecy in transactions are another red flag. Other methods involve transactions with high-risk jurisdictions that lack adequate counter-terrorism measures. Clients who appear to act as intermediaries for unknown third parties or the structuring of transactions to avoid reporting thresholds are also common. Additionally, the use of charitable organizations, religious organizations, or NGOs as fronts for fund transfers is a significant concern. Legal practitioners may encounter these methods indirectly when providing services to associations, trustees, or corporate vehicles. In the Nigerian context, common funding streams include kidnapping for ransom, illegal mining and resource exploitation, cattle rustling and banditry, cross-border smuggling, misuse of charities and non-profit organizations, and informal value transfer systems. The Nigerian legal framework on terrorism financing is supported by three key instruments: the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, and the Rules of Professional Conduct for Legal Practitioners 2023. The Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022 includes several key provisions. It criminalizes acts of terrorism financing. It grants powers to freeze, seize, and forfeit terrorist assets. It prohibits support, facilitation, or concealment of terrorist activities. It also imposes obligations to comply with United Nations Security Council resolutions. The Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022 recognizes terrorism financing as a predicate offense to money laundering. It also enables asset tracing and forfeiture. The Rules of Professional Conduct for Legal Practitioners, 2023, impose professional duties on lawyers. These include avoiding the facilitation of terrorism or terrorist financing. Lawyers are required to apply risk-based due diligence in covered transactions. They must also comply with targeted financial sanctions and freezing obligations. The high-risk legal services terrorism financing include the registration of associations, foundations, and trustees. They also include advisory roles for non-profit organizations and charities. Property transactions in conflict-affected regions are another area of concern. Additionally, representing clients linked to high-risk geographies poses significant risks. Importantly, litigation, advocacy, and defense services do not attract reporting obligations, provided the lawyer is not facilitating or disguising terrorist financing. That concludes Module 2. By applying these TPPA and RPC 2023 standards, you protect your practice and Nigeria's financial integrity from terrorism financing risks.